Is $2 million going to be enough for Mary and John to walk away from their corporate jobs? They just aren't feeling the love of the grind that drove them to be so successful for so long. Over dinner one night, Mary looks at John and says, "I just don't think I can do it for 9 more years. And John, well, he felt it too. They're burnt out. They're ready to walk away. But if they leave now, are they going to run out of money? They're going to end up eating rice and beans in their 80s? I've worked with many couples in this exact situation, and the challenges they face are incredibly common. When someone sits down with me for the first time, I like to show them how we get organized. Look at the big picture and answer those tough questions that everyone starts to ask about in this point in their career. We're going to find out if the Thompsons can actually afford to step away, how they can think strategically about Social Security timing, and how they can leverage their investments to live the life they want. The first step I take all my clients through is getting organized. It's impossible to answer the tough questions if all the information's not in one spot. At Glow, I use Right Capital as our main financial planning tool. Let's jump into the Thompsons' plan. The Thompsons have $75,000 in their bank accounts. They've always been comfortable with roughly a 6-month emergency fund. That's more than the average American, but now that retirement's closer than they expected, I would encourage them to rethink about how much cash they have on hand to weather any market downturns. Everyone has a different comfort level with risk, but moving from the accumulation phase into the decumulation phase, well, that opens people up to new risks that they weren't exposed to before. Now, the Thompsons have about $2 million in their investment accounts. Now, most of it's in their pre-tax retirement accounts, which is typical for people like the Thompsons. When I see profiles like this, it opens up all sorts of tax planning opportunities for them. Their home, it's worth $550,000, and they have a remaining mortgage of about $180,000. I'm not concerned about that at all for the Thompsons. We can have a conversation about paying off the mortgage, but I can tell you, it's not going to be a major lever in their plan. Let's take a look at where their income's coming from. They've done well in their careers, and they earn $280,000 per year right now. Now that's going to drop to zero if they retire at the same time. For Social Security, they're expecting a total benefit of about $70,000 per year. They're planning on taking it at age 67. Now, $70,000, that's not the maximum Social Security benefit for a couple, but it's a solid source of income to have in retirement. A lot of times when I talk to people, they have an age in mind where they want to claim Social Security. It's normal to have heard some sort of conventional wisdom and assume that's always going to be the right answer. But what I've found is that the right age, it's going to be different for everyone. When you claim Social Security, it can have unintended consequences on your long-term plan. Now, neither of their employers provided a pension for them. It was completely on the Thompsons to save for their own retirement. If they did have one, though, we could put it in the plan here. Honestly, the Thompsons, they managed to do really well with everything they were given. They worked hard to live within their means through their whole lives. For them, that means spending $6,000 a month on top of their mortgage. So in total, it's about $8,500 a month. Now that might seem high or low to you, but everyone's monthly spending is different. There's no judgment here. What matters is that you be honest what your life is actually going to look like. Now, for goals, both of them were planning to retire at 65. It's always been the plan, but now things have changed for the Thompsons, right? So let's actually quickly change this in the software to 57, and that'll allow them to retire in the plan next year. It's going to give them time at work to help their teams transition to them leaving. We could look at what it would look like if they retired tomorrow, but what I've found is that, yeah, for some people, they do want to quit on the spot and leave as soon as possible. But for most people, what I found is that once they know that they don't have to keep clocking in, working a little longer, it just doesn't feel as bad. Maybe if the Thompsons know they can step away comfortably, some of that spark might come back. They can exit on a high note. Retirement age, it's a number we can quickly change in the plan, and I'll typically run several different scenarios for people. Now, as for retirement spending, I assume initially that daily spending, it's not going to change that much. In my experience, most people's daily spend, it doesn't change immediately. For the spending strategy here, I'm going to use the retirement smile. It's another discussion I like to have with clients. Do you want to assume that your spending consistently increases with inflation, or would you prefer that it rise more gradually against inflation, which is more in line with research popularized by David Blanchett? Now, we also have the option to use some more tactical strategies if needed. I also like to isolate any goals separate from general spending. That way, they're not running the length of the plan in the background. For the Thompsons, one of these goals is travel. Bucket list trips to Europe and South America are waiting for them. Another one they have is replacing their cars. Vehicle replacements, remodels, those are the kind of large, bumpy expenses that I want people to be prepared for. That way, when they come up, we're not scrambling to help fund them. So, we're going to bake them into the plan. Quick note here, for medical expenses, everybody's situation is going to be different. But what we do know is that when people step away from their jobs before Medicare, they're often subject to much higher premiums than they were used to. With so much up in the air around the ACA subsidies, it's safe to err on the side of caution, especially in those early retirement years. For the Thompsons, we're using $1,000 per month per person. Now that's the gist of the Thompsons' financial life. Let's see where they stand. All right, so a 72% probability of success and an ending asset value of roughly $308,000. This year, this is a workable scenario. Now, would I tell a client in this situation to go ahead and retire next year and never worry about it again? No, probably not. But we have a phenomenal starting place. They definitely don't have to work till age 65 if they don't want to. Now, if you're looking at 72% and feeling anxious, completely valid. Some people see that number and think, that's not high enough. That's like a D in school, right? I don't want a D on my retirement report card. Others, well, they're going to look at it and start to feel pretty comfortable. There really is no perfect threshold here. When it comes down to it, it's all about how you feel about uncertainty and whether you'd rather have more confidence in the plan or a little bit more flexibility in your spending. Think of this analysis as a directional indicator. We're going to input everything in the plan that we can control. Then the software runs 1,000 scenarios in the background of all the variables we can't control. This is going to be things like market returns and inflation rates, as well as others. Think of it as, what's the chance that I can continue on my course without having to change any of those things that I can control? The easiest one to think about would be maybe adjusting your spending downward if the market takes a dip and picking it back up once it recovers. Well, let's see what happens when we make some strategic adjustments to the Thompsons plan, starting with their Social Security strategy. Let's look at what the numerically optimal plan is. Okay, so that actually hurts their plan. Surprising, right? Well, this is called sequence of returns risk. If you withdraw money when your portfolio is down, there's less in the account to recover during the next growth period. For Mary and John, this optimal strategy, well, it opens up their early retirement years to more volatility. And those early retirement years have to be covered with withdrawals from their portfolio. I know it feels a little counterintuitive. You've probably heard that delaying Social Security to 70 for the maximum benefit is always better. Mathematically, in a vacuum, you're right. It often is for people like the Thompsons that expect to live past their early 80s. But here's what I see with clients all the time. They're going to follow generic rules without understanding how it affects the rest of their plan. Your situation, it's not happening in a vacuum. Everything in the plan connects. This is why you can't follow generic rules. Every situation is going to be different. For Mary and John, they're 56 right now, so we actually don't have to make that decision today. We can continue to monitor the Social Security landscape as they approach age 62 and beyond. By then, we're going to have more data on how they're living in retirement. Everyone thinks that they know exactly what their retirement's going to look like, but I've never talked with anyone that didn't feel like it was a little bit different from their expectations once they got there. Maybe you're convinced you know exactly what you'll spend. Maybe you're worried because you have no idea. Either way, what I like to tell people is just give yourself a little permission to not have it all figured out right now. That's what good planning accounts for. The fact that life will surprise you. The takeaway here is waiting as long as possible to file would be the optimal Social Security strategy for the Thompsons, if everything plays out as we expect with regard to market returns, longevity, and their spending habits. But it opens their plan up to more volatility right now, so we're not going to count on it. Instead, we'll keep it in our back pocket as a lever we can pull to adjust to future changes. Now let's take a look at their investments. I'm going to adjust their current portfolio over here to our moderate portfolio. Okay, two things are happening here. Mary had rolled over an old 401k into an IRA and forgotten to reinvest the proceeds once they landed. Now, they also weren't sure if they should be using some of that money to go ahead and pay off their mortgage as they started thinking about retirement. I would want to set up their portfolio with one that matches their risk tolerance and risk capacity. The balance, it's going to be different for everybody. And if you're thinking, I would never make this kind of mistake, well, I've seen it more times than I can count. Life gets busy, a rollover happens, and the money just sits there. Or maybe it's different for you. Maybe it's not an old 401k. Maybe you have a savings account that has grown too large. Maybe you have some old bonds in your portfolio that just don't quite fit your plan anymore. It's not about blame. What it is about catching these things before they cost you over the long run. Now, many people assume that once you get to retirement, you really shouldn't be taking any risk in the market at all, but that behavior in itself, well, it's going to open a back door to other types of risks that you don't immediately perceive. That's what's happening here for the Thompsons. They need to take on some risk in the market to support a 30 to 40 year retirement. If they exited the market completely today, the $2 million, it's definitely not enough. Their allocation in retirement, well, it happens to be a major lever in their plan. So we might set up a bucket strategy for them where some funds are allocated for near-term goals, others are going to be set aside for later down the road. Having the right portfolio, it's going to open up other opportunities for the Thompsons, and we'll look at that more a little bit in a minute. Now, just like Social Security strategy or retirement portfolio, it should be dynamic. It should change as other variables adjust. Does that mean we're going to be jumping in and out of the market just because of the 5 o'clock news? No. But what if their goals changed? What if they had a new health scenario? What if they needed to raise cash to move? Or maybe it's a remodel. Maybe they want to help a family member pay for school. It could be a million things. Priorities 5 years into retirement might look completely different than they're imagining today. And the point is not to predict everything perfectly. It's to build a plan that has flexibility into it. And that way you can adapt when life happens. My job here is just to show the options, the pros and cons of every choice. All right, let's take a look at their tax strategy. Now, as I alluded to earlier, early retirement opens up some unique tax planning opportunities. Let's change it and implement a tax plan. Okay, it's a smaller bump in the probability of success than changing their investments. And what a lot of people miss here with a tax strategy is that those early retirement years, before Social Security kicks in, are often some of the lowest tax brackets that you'll ever be in. If all your money's in the pre-tax accounts like the Thompsons, you're probably going to be in a higher tax bracket at 80 than 60. And that feels wrong, doesn't it? But it's incredibly common and it's fixable if you plan for it. We also would want to look at where each investment type is kept. Stocks and bonds, they're more efficient in different types of accounts. The tax strategy here in Right Capital, it includes all that. It has a minor reduction in the volatility of the Thompsons plan, but if you look here, it has a major impact in the ending assets of their plan. $1.2 million increase. So it's definitely worth executing for Mary and John. All right, now that their probability is up to 94%, I'm going to say something that might surprise you. That's actually higher than is necessary for most people. Remember, the tool here in Right Capital is navigational. It's not predictive. 94% is mathematically higher than we're going to typically need for a successful retirement. And that probably means they're just leaving money on the table. Now, passing on an extra $1.2 million to your children, well, that's great if that's what you want to do. But let's see what we can do to improve the quality of their retirement without sacrificing total confidence in the plan. We'll increase their spending here by $1,000 a month. Let's see what happens. Now we're down to 84%, and that's a number I'm more comfortable with as a planner. I'm guessing you're thinking, well, I wanted a 94% probability. I want to be safe. That's an A. That's totally valid. There's no wrong answer, but I'd rather be having a conversation with somebody just telling them they need to wait a little bit longer to do something they want to in retirement rather than witness them never getting to do that thing because they were too worried about spending money from their portfolio or they were just trying to optimize for Roth conversions. There's no magic number here. Some people want 95%. Others, they're going to be comfortable at 80. It's all about your risk tolerance and your plan. Would you rather have higher confidence in the overall plan or more spending money to live the life you want to do? That's the conversation we have. All right, so let's look at where we ended up with the Thompsons. We started at a 72% probability of success, a little more than $300,000 at the end of their plan. After optimizing their portfolio, being strategic about Social Security timing, implementing a tax plan, and now we're at 84% with over $2 million at the end of their plan. And here's the part that really mattered to Mary and John. They can now spend $7,000 a month instead of $6,000, or they could double their annual travel budget. This is the same couple. It's the same $2 million, and it's a completely different outcome. Now that tax piece we touched on briefly, those Roth conversions, that's worth understanding more. I do have a full video breaking down exactly how that strategy works in those early retirement years. Click here if you want to watch that one. And if you're looking at the Thompson situation and you're thinking to yourself, I wonder what my numbers look like. Well, that's exactly the conversation we should have. I work with people who are asking themselves these same questions. It's not ideal to start planning when you're about to pull the trigger for retirement. Instead, it's better to start now when you still have time to make the decisions that matter. If you want to see where you stand or talk your situation over, head over to my website. It is linked down in the description. Schedule a free Get Started meeting. There's no pressure. It's just a conversation about whether comprehensive planning makes sense for where you're at. Thanks for watching. I'm Jordan Drinkhouse. I'll see you in the next one.